Because my goodness, if I'm teaching the same way that I was teaching in 2003 when I first got certified, no. I'm sure it was fine for the time, but like, yeah, if yoga is this process of refinement and awareness, so should our teaching be. So there's absolutely not one right way to do a pose. Bodies are different. We're different at different stages of our life, like in our own body, let alone other people's bodies. Why on earth would we want to try to think ever that there's a right way to do a pose? Modern yoga here, the yoga that we're all practicing, is absolutely influenced by these systems of power.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm handing the mic over to Brea for a conversation that might feel like a sigh of relief, especially if you've ever felt pressure to teach a certain way. We're talking about the things Brea no longer does as a yoga teacher after 20 plus years of experience in the field. From rigid alignment cues to romanticizing yoga lineages, this is a thoughtful and refreshingly honest look at how teaching evolves when we prioritize critical thinking, accessibility, and sustainability over perfection and performance. So, Brea, let's get into it. You've made a powerful list of things that you've let go of as a teacher. Can you walk us through what shifted for you and why these changes mattered?
Yeah, well, I hope that at any point of us teaching or as we teach, I hope that we do continue to grow and evolve so that we all have our own variations of these lists. Because my goodness, if I'm teaching the same way that I was teaching in 2003 when I first got certified, no. Like, I'm sure it was fine for the time, but like, yeah, if yoga is this process of refinement and awareness, so should our teaching be. So yeah, I think this is a natural evolution regardless of who we are and what we're doing. May we always be able to grow and evolve our teaching. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to go back and look at what has changed, what doesn't change. And I'm really excited about the things that I no longer do. I think they're really important. And yeah, let's go into it. So the first one is I no longer teach the ideal pose. And whether that was really prevalent and specific in the ways that I was teaching or was being taught, like I don't know if any teacher was like, this is the ideal pose, but it was definitely inferred. Right. I think it's inferred through the Yoga Journal magazine back in the day, pre-social media. It was inferred in all the workshops that we did where we were all like gathered around the one person who was super flexible, and we'd all clap at the end of that workshop or the demo because they were able to do the ideal version of the pose. So it was definitely part of the yoga zeitgeist, and maybe in some contexts and parts of the world and areas and communities that still exist today, even though I feel like I'm in my own little bubble and I don't see that as much. But there's absolutely not one right way to do a pose. Like, really, bodies are different. We're different at different stages of our life, like in our own body, let alone other people's bodies. Why on earth would we want to try to think ever that there's a right way to do a pose? So number one, love this, no one right way to do a pose. And in fact, most of my poses when I'm teaching, not necessarily most, but a lot of times I'm not even teaching an entire pose. It's become even more deconstructed, and we're doing different movements that might turn into a pose. But often some classes don't even look that asana based, but it makes it much more inclusive and supportive for the various people in my classes. And it goes back to what we've talked about. I can't remember which, and I think I've bring this up in various episodes, but I think we talked a little bit more about it in one episode that I can't think of. So just go listen to all our episodes and you'll hear it. But I think it also, when we pull it back even further, why? Because I go, well, why was there ever a thought of an ideal pose in the first place? Why? And then to me, then you peel it back and you recognize yoga is not immune from the culture that we're in. So modern yoga here, the yoga that we're all practicing, is absolutely influenced by these systems of power. And systems of power want us to look the same way, to be the same way. Systems of power love idealized things, love having some sort of hierarchy of like, this is the ideal race, this is the ideal body, this is the ideal gender, this is the ideal sexual, like all these things. And then if you're not that, then you're not part of that ideal part of so there's so much that we need to see and unpack in that. So it's not even just, oh, we all have different bodies, but it's like, why do we even think this in the first place? So it's insidious, and it's how these systems of power continue to be successful because we've all internalized that. So my goodness, we could do a 3-hour podcast on that alone. And like I said, this always comes in to virtually all my teaching. So go listen to the other ones for a little bit more conversation around that. But then continuing that, because it's all sort of under that same trend, the second one would be I no longer use rigid alignment cues. Because I think of so many of us, especially if we started teaching a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades, there were alignment cues. It was like, put your right foot forward, step your dip up. It was like very, I always use the word choreographed in a way. It's like, these are the words that you use for this pose, which goes back to thus we have this idea that there's an ideal pose. And therefore, to get to that ideal pose, here's the cues that you need to say to create that pose. So, good news is when we learn more about the body, when we understand human movement, we recognize, oh, there are many paths to the truth, right? There's many paths to what can I do for my body? What can I do? So alignment, schmalignment. I loved alignment back when alignment was cool in a way, right? It was almost like, because it was like in my experience, it was like, yoga classes as a teacher, you were taught, here are the things you say for each pose. And then it shifted into like, alignment during the Anusara days, if anybody remembers that, and the universal principles of alignment, which were very much similar to Iyengar yoga alignment cues, which were all very like, very, what's the word? Just directive, again, performance based in a way, like putting us all into that. So anyways, so alignment, schmalignment, there are ways that we can align our body that are more supportive biomechanically, but I don't use those as rules either. I use that as a gateway and a starting point or a foundation without it being rigid.
In the last couple of years have been seeing a lot of, or even just around like in the workout industry with things like squats, and based on people's femur lengths and things like that, a squat could look so different. So of course if yeah, so it's like people are like, you have to squat this certain way, your knee has to be here, you have to blah blah blah, and then you realize no, like based on the length of your literally your bones, it's going to look different. And I remember years ago, the first time I was taking a class, and a teacher was like, it was a deep lunge, and she's like, okay, and bring your knee towards your toes past your ankle. And I thought, oh my God, I thought we're not supposed to do that, you know? And she's like, it's going to feel so good in the calf, probably, whatever. And I do it all the time now as a calf stretch. But I remember years ago, it was like this big no-no to bring your knee forward of your ankle, because it was like stacked. Like you only stack it that way because it's considered dangerous to do it any other way.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay. So I think maybe what I'm recognizing as we go through this, Ula, is that we should be doing a podcast episode to debunk for every single one of these. Because in my head, as I'm about to reply to you, I'm like, well, because it's just like a can of beautiful worms to try to unpack and go, well, exactly. Because it's not wrong to say stack the knee, because in some, like a lot of cases, sure, it is. But also when you hike up that mountain, when you go up those stairs, your knee every day is traveling over your ankle. Okay. I'm going to, before I, Number three.
Go to number
so my
three.
friends,
well, if you want this to be a podcast, you need to
please
comment.
Exactly leave a comment. Let us know which one do you want to hear more or all of. Okay, so that's number three. We no longer push people deeper. Oh wait, we're still only in two. Okay, gotcha. Wait. Yeah, so there we go. So and we're only at number two, my friends. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is, again, very similar to the first two, which would be push people deeper into stretches. I no longer push people deeper into stretches. And that can be coined in lots of different ways. Is that a physical adjustment where we're like, yes, I'm going to press down on your back in a wide angled forward bend so you can go, quote, quote, deeper into this stretch? Is it pushing verbally, right? This sort of like verbal instruction and even class environment of, which goes back to the first one, teaching ideal pose. That's what when I said it was sort of like, whether it was never ever overt that we thought that there was an ideal pose in so many different ways, yoga studio culture really showed us that there was an ideal pose, which is continuing, which is number three, pushing people deeper into stretches. That also infers to us that where you are right now isn't good enough. And also, caveat, I feel like I had some real good back in the day physical adjustments that did get me further and actually kind of felt good. And I did like, so it's never binary. I'm never like, don't you ever do this. And I also got pushed deeper in the pose in that one specific one in a wide angle forward bend in an Ashtanga class. My head was close to the floor, and that well-intentioned teacher was like, let's get your chest to the floor now, because head to the floor wasn't enough. And there was some weird little pop in my hip. Luckily, it wasn't a lasting thing, but right, my body didn't need to go that much further. It's also subtly showing us where we are isn't good enough. Who we are right now isn't good enough. There's always more to go. And yes, we're always growing and changing. But again, these systems of power, these systems of oppression that are always like excel, perfection, you're never good enough as you are. This is what's happening in yoga. So when we try to get ourselves pushed deeper into stretches, it's also reiterating that message that, hey, where you're at right now, not good enough. You gotta don't celebrate because also this all charges me up so much. Because also maybe let's use that example where I had my head to the ground. I started yoga very inflexible. I was probably in that wide angle forward bend in my first class with my hips barely moving forward. I was like miles away from the ground. So actually, if I wanted to celebrate a sense of progress, where I was in that moment was further, if that was the goal, further than I was when I started. So that should have been a win rather than this continued messaging unconsciously, subtly going, oh, sure, what's your progress? Look at now, you got to keep going. And like, when's enough? When is enough, my friends? Also, look at capitalism, look at billionaires. We are seeing the issues that arise when we have unfettered belief that the future is like that infinite growth, infinite progress. Things do need to stop at some point, including how far we go in a stretch. So there's that one. We do not need to go further into stretches. Okay, then number 4, our fourth one would be I no longer cue things like open your heart, square your hips without context. And this one might be a little bit controversial. And again, know that when I'm saying these things, first of all, this is my personal experience. This is how I am as a teacher. You are allowed and encouraged to teach and be as you are and who you are. So anything that I'm saying here, I'm not saying it like, so what I'm saying is the best and what you're doing, if it's different, is bad. Not at all. But this is for me and my experience. We can say things like open your heart because we get it. And I want an open heart. I don't want a closed heart. Thank you, yoga, because you've actually helped me have an open heart. But sometimes in our yoga asana classes, it can reinforce sort of like toxic positivity, right? Because it's always like, just be open. And sometimes I don't have the capacity or desire to be open. I'm actually kind of mad right now. And my anger on whatever the thing is, let's say, is actually telling me something important. And so I'm not going to bypass that and just be like, hey, I'm so mad, or I'm grieving something, like whatever these like normal human emotions are. Just open your heart. Like there's not enough context. And it's well intentioned, but again, something deeper to unpack. Hey,
I've cried in classes, and like for legitimate reasons. I can like specifically think when and why, and it really had nothing to do with what the teacher was saying. It's just that in that moment, that's actually what I needed, and I went to yoga because I was seeking like a emotional, physical release of like, you know, getting out of my head and moving through those feelings. And I never resonated with exactly what you're talking about, the like open your heart and your emotions are in your hips. And I'm like, my emotions are not in my hips, let me tell you that right now. um I think it kind of assumes where people are at. And also, to me, I know maybe not everyone agrees with this one, but I do think yoga can attract people that are seeking something. And so I know I was that person. I was going to yoga for emotional, not just physical reasons. So there's this careful boundary. I think as a teacher, you want to make sure you're not becoming that like guru slash therapist. That's not your role. And so the moment we cross over into it, I think it's kind of like a slippery slope. It's the same reason I never tried to teach or force any of like the other limbs of the practice of like overly spiritual. I just always believe if people are curious, they will find their way towards it, and that will be a natural thing. It doesn't have to be forced in a class.
Yeah, Uli, you touched on some really important points here about that like boundary of cult dynamics. And I'm saying cult dynamics very specific because it's like I can say that, and if somebody's listening, be like, well, what Ula just cult dynamics? But my friends, and in fact,
I was in, yeah, I went to a studio, which we want to do a podcast on accidental cults. I should like submit my
me
own.
too.
So yeah, if you have good stories, we do have we are looking for your accidental cult
Oh
stories.
yeah. And when you understand what constitutes a cult, because I think a lot of times we're like, oh, that's, we're all going to drink the Kool-Aid. And it's like that very like, I'm obviously in a cult, but the qualities and what constitutes a cult are actually, when you hear it, you're like, oh, that yoga studio or that teacher or that lineage that I was, oh, that's kind of cult adjacent or like on the spectrum towards full on cult. And funny that you're saying that, because I'm actually listening to a book on, because audiobook. Yeah. Anyways, I'm listening to a book about a woman's story. I don't remember what it is off the top. I love cult dynamics. I find them super fascinating because I think being in this yoga world for so long and sort of finding myself as well in a couple of various accidental almost cults. Luckily, yeah. Okay, I love this. Everybody, again, if you want deeper, like a whole conversation on this, let us know. But this book is talking about this, and she's just in this smaller kind of cult that was actually here in Canada in the 90s. And I'm just listening to it. And what I like about it is that she's peppering in like research on cults. And so it's like I'm hearing the mega cult, right? So I'm hearing how like, because she's also like, cults are authoritarianism. Cults are taking the self away. Cults are okay. Cults are interesting, and yoga can. I'll leave that.
Noted. We need a whole episode on yoga cults.
and how, if we can find, yeah, okay. So my friends, but isn't this interesting that here we're just, it's like I no longer use words like open your heart, and it led to starting a conversation around culty dynamics because so many things. It's subtle. And so when we give space for people to be themselves, not to have group speak, group think, where your body, do you, whatever, it's all cool. And I always go back to that saying by Brene Brown, where it's like, fitting in is the opposite of belonging. We think we want to fit in, right? We all, yeah, right. Thank you, Brene Brown. Like chew on that for, because like we're socially wired creatures. This is how we are as humans. We need to be in community. That's like literally our evolution. That's how we're wired in the brain. And so it gets twisted when we try to fit in, and fitting in is us trying to like, oh, I'm at this new yoga studio and everybody's wearing these fancy yoga clothes and wearing their mala beads and speaking this like yoga language that I don't know about. And I want to be a part of this. So I'm going to try to fit in to belong to that. Where if we were in spaces of belonging, you can show up in none of that. You can show up in your like totally opposite self, whatever it is. And if you like, may you feel like you still belong. So teachers, can we create spaces and classes where people feel like they belong rather than having to fit in? And then that's how you know you're not in a cult. Okay. Whew, okay, we're only on number 4, my friends. Okay, let's go to number 5. This is another one. I no longer assume. Okay, I have a cute, like, as I'm about to say this, I'll have like an inner cringe of just like gentleness towards like younger teacher Brea. So, because, okay, so here's the thing. It says, I no longer assume that everybody wants hands-on adjustments. And I still feel like, I'm sorry if anybody in my enthusiasm in my younger years was like, let me push down on your back in child's pose, which again, sometimes it felt so good. And other times,
I love it.
Right. And also, so again, that's another deeper conversation we could talk about, like adjustments. What are they? Why are they? How can we do them with consent? How can we do them with support? Because I never want to say don't ever touch people, but there's ways in which we can do that is fulfilling for each other, which again goes back into that culty dynamics, these power dynamics of, and the cultural unsaid assumption of, the teacher, the power dynamic is, I know your body better than you do. So I'm going to do a physical adjustment and push you into something. Or we're trying to find that ideal pose. And that, so again, notice how I no longer teach the ideal pose and how that is still showing up in each of the things that I've said so far. So this idealism, and that shows up in our adjustments. And yet there are ways that we can adjust where I might, as a teacher now, go, if we've already had consent already, like, okay, and like touch the shoulder, just a nice nudge, or have my hand on somebody's foot if they're in a half moon pose or something. Now it's like push your foot into my hand. So I'm not like manipulating them, but I'm being there as someone who's like helping them find an action rather than adjusting them into something. So definitely consent, autonomy comes first.
I'm laughing because one of the studios, and this was years ago, one of the studios I had gone to, I'm laughing because I can still remember it so clearly. This teacher, male teacher, would walk behind you, and let's say you're doing like a standing posture, and it almost doesn't matter what. They would come behind you and they would almost like hug you from behind and like breathe with you. Like, I almost like, and it was like totally normal, like there. Like, it was just like a totally normal thing. It wasn't, so when you talk about like hands on, it wasn't even like, hey, I'm going to push you into this posture to be deeper or stretching. It's like, I'm going to help you breathe into this posture. And it's like, this dude just going behind women and like hugging them basically and breathing into their backs.
Oh, bless us all. Like just all of us when we didn't really know better. That teacher, ourselves.
I will say, like, I never had a problem with this person. They were totally nice. I will be clear, this person never even gave off creeper vibes. It wasn't even that. It's just that this assumption that it's okay. And I never had a reaction, or I never had like a trauma in my life that would, this would be awful, but there are people who would. And so I can't imagine in that setting, even having the strength or like the comfort to ask, to say no. Like, how do you even say no? There's 30 people in the room. The expectation is that this is allowable. This person's going to touch you. And do you want to be that person that like fights back? Like, it's really setting people up to be victimized, basically. Even if it was not the intention, it puts people in a very vulnerable position.
Yes, Ula. So thus you demonstrated another aspect of how like yoga can be culty, on the culty spectrum. Because that is how these things happen. It's all about power, and where it gets sticky is the subtleness of it. Everything you just named. Because also too, if you identify as a woman and have been socialized as a woman, you already are primed in these scenarios. We're already been socialized to let go of our power, not know our power, to let men come into our spaces, to be really nice. But I want to say no, but I'm going to say no in this nice voice and have 500 like different nice ways of saying no, or not say no at all, because I don't want to hurt their foot. Like, So when we bring all of that's happening anyways outside of the yoga space into the yoga space, then there's the spiritual element of like, well, the teacher, right? They know all. And then the socialization of the patriarchy, because if it's a male teacher, oh, well, then let me tell you, if he has a beard, well, then he's even more spiritual.
I'm laughing because yes.
Because yes, I know.
Beard with long hair.
I remember back in the heyday, I feel like I knew all the like guru adjacent male teachers that I knew all had bloody beards. And I just like kept making this joke of like, well, what's my version of the, like, if I want to be like joking, because I don't, but if I want to be a guru, like notice how women, we don't quite have. Granted, there are also women who have been problematic and guru-like, but also too, back to what you're using this example of this guy, whether it was well-intentioned or not, it was completely inappropriate for him to do that. Whether he didn't do it, because also time and time again, it is the most boring and obvious thing of how often we have seen male yoga teachers fall prey to sexual abuse and power. It's like, it's like when I hear another male yoga teacher getting arrested or like accused of sexual assault, I'm like, this is... Another one bites the dust. Surprise, surprise. because yoga is still under patriarchy, right? Again, this is what I'm talking about when we talk about systems of power. It is yoga classes, yoga here in the West is not immune to them. And those systems are showing up. And we can see that through the lens of the patriarchy and all the conditioning that we've already named. Whew, okay, I'm getting fired up on all of this. But it's good. Okay, so I'm gonna take a deep breath. So yes, these are some of the big reasons why I no longer do a hands-on adjustments, because it's power, man. Power in all its forms, and we have to wield it very mindfully. Okay, next one. I no longer teach the same sequence to every body, which is kind of an interesting one, because if you're hearing that and you're like, well, what are you doing in your classes? Like, I just created one sequence. And what do you mean? Huh? So what I mean by that is, yes, there's a sequence. And yes, especially as a newer teacher, or how your brain is wired as a teacher, because I recognize we're all different. For me, I'm more of an intuitive teacher. That's also 2 decades plus of like teaching a lot of yoga, like it's in my body, it's in my back pocket, so to speak. I can teach a fairly intuitive class where I'm not sitting pre each class planning it out at all. That's not me. That being said, that may be you, and you may be teaching for 2 decades and still plan out your classes. So all the ways are welcome, right? But as teachers, we have our sequence, and let that be that template, that jumping off point. But if I show up, and I don't know how many times I've gone into a class, and a lot of you teachers listening to this, I'm sure have had this same experience where you're like, okay, I'm so excited to teach this like amazing shoulder sequence that I, spent 3 hours working on. Woo, can't wait. And then you see the class, and the energy level is like, everybody looks tired. Or you start moving and you're like, oh, this isn't the sequence for this group today. What am I going to do? Am I going to still teach that sequence, or am I going to adapt to the people in front of me? And hopefully, as yoga teachers, as we get more clear and confident in our abilities to teach, to know the body, to know movement, then I hope we're able to start to be a little bit more responsive as teachers. So that's what I mean when I say teaching the same sequence to everybody. I'm not going to stick to that if it's not my pre-planned sequence, if it's not really what I'm seeing in front. Okay. Yay. That one was easy, my friends. We didn't have to get charged up too much on that. So let's continue onwards. The next one is, and we're number 7. I no longer romanticize yoga lineages without critique. I purposely.
Are we gonna get fired up?
I know. I purposely left that of like a blank, like a silence after that. Let's like ingest that for a second. And again, maybe I'm in my own like happy little bubble of yoga where I don't pay attention to this stuff anymore. I don't know, with the advent of social media, if yoga lineages are as much of a thing, or maybe they are, but again, I'm in my own bubble. So there's my caveat. I don't see them as much of a thing for me as I did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And there's so many times people, like, what kind of yoga do you teach? Who's your teacher? And that one always bugged me in some ways. I'm like, I teach yoga, but I still felt like I had to have this pressure of, well, what's your lineage? And like, yeah. Again, another one of these things, like we need critique. We need to know, again, it all comes down to systems of power, my friends. If you're ever wondering why things are the way they are, just like continue to learn or learn from different people about systems of oppression, capitalism, ableism, patriarchy, white supremacy, so many other, off the top of my head here. And so again, sometimes I'll say systems of oppression, or I'll say systems of power, because they are built on, and this is the world, and this is not just my opinion, this is straight up fact. And there's tons of amazing people who research this and share it and educate it. So, because we can see then that those same systems, as we've talked about in the different points already, is that this still applies to different lineages. And a lot of those lineages are cult adjacent. They sometimes will have, and pretty consistently, a charismatic male teacher, who's trying to create their own thing. Some of them, have been passed down generationally, like the Desikachars and whatnot. But even that, so if you know your yoga, modern yoga lineage, there's like Krishnamacharya, who is sort of like the godfather, grandfather of modern yoga, whose son was Desikachar, and then son Kausta of Desikachar, and a lot of like Iyengar, Patabi Joyce from Ashtanga were taught by Desikachar and Krishnamacharya and like in that lineage. So it sounds like, okay, cool. And they're all Indian teachers, like they came from the source culture, but there's still problematicness within that. We want to romanticize this sort of perception of this spiritual practice that yoga is. Yoga's not, we all know it's not just physical asana, it's a spiritual wisdom tradition that's been around for thousands of years. And the yoga that these modern godfathers, grandfathers of yoga have brought to the West, Yogananda, like they're still part of this colonized tradition. They're still part of the patriarchy. They're still like these things that these systems of power exalt and lift up are brought into this practice. And so going back and doing our research and understanding a little bit more of the cultural conditions of the yoga that we know of now to where it's come from and where it's kind of started it's big, and it's important to yeah, I'm now I'm like, so before I was getting fired up, and now I'm just feeling like, this is a big thing, because it's all this stuff that we're talking about. We want to romanticize. We want to romanticize this yoga and my teacher. And it's, again, putting the power into something else, when at its heart, these practices, yoga, the texts, were not about follow your teacher blindly. It's like, learn about yourself. How do I be a better person? That's what a wisdom tradition is. And so any teacher that's out there being like, well, I'm gonna gatekeep it. I'm the one who has all the answers. You all have to listen to me. You have to follow it in my TM trademarked kind of way. Like Bikram, come on, my friends. Go watch the Bikram documentary if you've never seen it. Like, if you really want to see yoga teacher gone bad, yoga lineage gone bad.
I feel like you did a really good job kind of speaking about the past. What popped into my mind was like almost the most current, and I don't even know if I would call them like lineages, just because they're things that have popped up within the last like 10 years, let's say, right? Like the iterations of like different types of hot yoga or power flows or like TM everything, and they are corporations and businesses, which is kind of like an interesting thing to think of when it's linked to yoga. And we're talking about yoga being a practice of knowing yourself, and it can be a spiritual practice for many people. And here we are in the West, like selling franchises, and you have to do a certain type of sequencing. You need to get training through their special schools, and I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying it's good to kind of maybe dig around a little bit and be like, is this a good fit for me? Do I agree with what their practices are? And also like the way that they might promote your practice, or like how to perform your practice, may not always be the best for everybody. I'm thinking a lot about those like really intense challenges, like 30-day challenges and things like that are more about marketing, I think, than they really are about building like a sustainable practice for a student. The like one time I got injured was because I did like a 30-day hot yoga challenge. It was because I was just overdoing it. I was in a hot room. I was pushing myself every day. I was repetitive. There wasn't enough variety. I wasn't supplementing with anything else. And sure enough, near like day 30, I like really hurt my back, and I literally would just go and lay on the mat in the hot room because I was like, well, at least I'll finish the challenge, but I'm not doing the yoga the last 3 days because my back is messed up.
Well, I'd argue that you actually were doing the yoga
Yeah.
in the end.
I wasn't doing their sequence.
Yeah. Because you were listening to yourself and did the thing
Yeah.
that you needed to do. But yeah, all very good points, because let's bring it back to those systems of power, which, let's name that one, capitalism. So when we're trying to like, and my friends, like, we're living under capitalism here. We can't extricate ourselves from it. Here we are, it is what it is. And so for me as a business, because Heart and Bones as a business, I'd love all of you to come and be a member of the online studio, take our teacher trainings, of course. I'm not going to pretend that. like like for a lot of reasons, and capitalism, so we can make a living. But then it's when it's like, but then all the like, but so in my mind, it's like we can do capitalism differently. I want to, as a business, hopefully be able to, the best that I can, show that Heart and Bones is doing capitalism in a way that's still collective, that's still, yes, we're trying to make money because I want to have a house over my head and live, but doing it with these ethical awarenesses. And I think the ones that you've named of these like TM, trademarked, why are they doing that in the first place? Because capitalism, because they're being proprietary, they're being gatekeeping, they're being exclusive. Well, I'm going to TM the sequence of movements in the body. Well, what? No, 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 no. So I get really fired up about like, we can still have success as teachers and businesses and be inclusive. Actually, wouldn't that be just the biggest FU to capitalism? Having an amazingly, wildly successful business that is actually all of these tenets of the true deep practice of yoga. But because a lot of those businesses that you're talking about, also, you're right, they go back to the things that I've already named of what I no longer do, which is like still creating that hierarchy, still creating like not really very inclusive practices. We're all doing the same, so I'm just going to use Bikram. Like it's that sequence doesn't change. It's for all bodies, but it's not actually for all bodies. Everybody's just expected to do it. Their owner, Bikram himself, is a sexual predator and a capitalistic asshole and just a bad example of a yoga teacher, to say
It's
the
like that
least.
documentary was very eye-opening.
Oh, it's so, and because it's like I knew and then I didn't know. Ooh, another side note, everybody listening, Breath of Fire, the Kundalini documentary. I don't, now I'm blanking. Was it called Breath of Fire? And it shows, so Kundalini yoga, that's just friends like, hey, if you've had joy, if you teach Kundalini, great, but it behooves you to go find out who Yogi Bhajan was, and to find out a lot of who these current teachers, or at least teachers 5-10 years ago, uh, what's her name again? I like watching the documentary. I thought I knew. I thought, same with Bikram, both those documentaries. I was like, yeah, I know they're all shit, but then I watched them and I was like, oh damn.
Yeah,
Oh
it's a TV miniseries, Breath of Fire 2024, I believe is what it
yes.
was. I will say I went to I know Kundalini yogis, and I went to a phenomenal Kundalini class in Vancouver. Someone told me, they're like, you gotta go to this class. It's so energizing. It was like, I think at Y Yoga in Vancouver, it was like one of their like 6 a.m. morning classes, and it was like wild. And I was like, I can see why people love this, because it's like it really gets the blood rushing. We had to do like partner squats, like you're holding hands, and it was like I've never been to a class like that since. It was fascinating, but yeah, long term it wasn't for me. But I can see why people love it.
Yeah, and that again, I think on our future cult dynamic podcast now, we can see, because it's never, this is how these things work. It's not like it's inherently bad, let's say. It's not like, yeah, you felt energized. I remember, because I also love mantra and chanting and singing. And so Kundalini yoga had that. And I remember living in a place that had a really amazing teacher. I couldn't really care less about the way they did the movements, but I went there for the like half hour of mantra. But this was led by a white woman in a turban. And I didn't have the knowledge at that time to really be able to name how problematic that was. Because again, so here's how it's fed. Like, in fact, a lot of times it's like, well, she must be, they might, like, she's wearing a turban. So it's like she has the spiritual accoutrements. Maybe that's the version of the beard, right? I don't know, that we were talking about with like male yoga teachers, but it's appropriative of the Sikh culture. Like it's like the Sikh religion. It's really not, it's layers of problematicness, but it's not to say that it's not, some of the things that they're teaching isn't wrong. And that's the seduction. And that's the tricky part. And that's the part where that critical thinking and continued education is so vitally important. And again, that's a yoga microcosm. Look at the broader political macrocosm that we're in, where we're heading towards fascism right now. And we think things like fascism are just going to all of a sudden happen, but it's like a slow descent into eroding and homogenizing us so that, anyway, okay, there's my rant. My friends, But see how it's all connected. It's all like we can't just be like, I don't teach this because of that. It's like, because this is the systems of power and they're showing up in yoga. Okay, continuing on. Let's go to let's see, where were we? Okay, so number 8, seeing flexibility as the end goal. I don't need to unpack this one more. I think we, like in our hypermobility podcast episode, we talk a lot about flexibility, hypermobility, stability, healthy functional movement. So go listen to that episode. Bottom line, I think it has the same roots. Why do we think we all need to be flexible? Yeah, like healthy range of motion in the joints are important, but ultimately we are how we are and we're all at different abilities in our bodies. So being flexible to a certain point is really not the end goal. Okay, so easy peasy that one. So number 9, I no longer think about being a good teacher as being selfless. And this is a really interesting one. And I think this is one that I highly recommend us all to continue to unpack on a lot of levels. Because again, I think there's that socialization, especially as a woman, if you identify as a woman, to think that, well, I'm going to be nice. And then this yoga, I'm going to be nice about it all. And I'm a good yoga teacher. But what's often happening with that well-intentioned space is that our boundaries are being pushed. You don't have to sit there as a yoga teacher and hear everybody's problems after the class, right? So how often has any of us, you're at the end of the class and somebody comes up to you and then all of a sudden they're treating you like their therapist. You don't have to be in that space. You don't have to give them that time. I'm not saying like, shut up, don't talk to me. Like there's like kind ways to draw a boundary, but know our role, know our boundaries. And that actually is super kind. So taking money is okay. Even though I was just talking about capitalism, no, don't be Jeff Bezos, don't be Bikram, but you are allowed to make money at the living this thing that you've spent a lot of money on your own training and time and education. We all are needing to live and we live under capitalism, so we have to work. So you're allowed to ask for money for your classes. So that's a big one about like being a good yoga teacher is selfless.
I've mentioned before that I've done by donation classes, and I loved teaching this way because it did open, like we've talked in the past about economic access to yoga, and I thought it was very fair for both sides. If you cannot afford the regular drop-in rate, which can be easily $20 or more at a studio, you can give me nothing, give me a $2, I don't care, because it always worked out in the end. So I did believe in that. And it was hilarious when I first started this, how many people um, were saying the word donation, or was I teaching this as like a donation class? And I was like, it's not a donation. And this assumption, it was very much linked to, well, yoga should be free. Like you should not charge for yoga, versus me being from the place of, I actually do believe I should make an income and wage from teaching. I just want to make it accessible, which is completely two different things, right? Like it's like it's a place of like, I know I deserve to be paid because, just like you said, I actually invested in my training. I set up the time, I did the marketing for this, there's all these other things. The other thing I'm going to throw out there, and maybe this is a bit of a spicy opinion,
Oh, we've been spicy this whole time, my friend. Let's bring it on.
but talking about the selflessness, I have also experienced teachers, and this links back, not shocking, I think, to the culty vibes, the idea that by being selfless, you actually are gaining like a little bit of an ego boost because you are like acting more spiritually superior and higher than other people. And I have literally seen this where it's like this like guru mentality that they're selfless and they'll tell you these like ways of being, and like they'll give you everything. And I just, because of my experiences, I've learned to question that sometimes, being like, why are they telling me these things? And like, why are they giving me this advice? I think I've told you how I took this like meditation training, this like 50-hour meditation training, and the teacher was like, mid training was like, at the end I will tell you something special. And they came at the end, and I, as soon as they did it at the very end, I was like, this is a tactic. They are saying that they know something more than I know about myself. And they're being selfless by telling me this information.
Which is
So
still a power grab.
it is a power grab. And so part of me is like, I don't think most people listening to this are that. But if you are going to a class and there's this like extremely selfless, I'm putting air quotes, selfless person, just take it with a grain of salt sometimes too, because there's versions of this.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing to unpack on so many levels because you're so right. What you just said, you good on you, Ula, by the way. You used your discernment, which is one of our yoga principles here. So, yay, yoga. You got your gift, just not the one that the teacher was going to bequeath on you at the end of this. Right?
Dang, it didn't work on her.
Yeah. Like because it's manipulative. And that teacher might have really believed their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They might have believed and it was well intentioned, but that's again the nebulous power dynamic that we all, both maybe as teachers and students, play into in these scenarios. So, what is selfless, right? It's like, so maybe to simplify that, my mind goes right back to that Brene Brown quote, fitting in is the opposite of belonging. Because if we were in a space of true belonging, I'd like to think that I don't need to be selfless. Myself is perfect as it is in this space where I get to be me fully and you get to be you fully and that other person gets to be them fully and it's all great and we don't and then because that in of itself is a boundary. Does that make sense? Like where if I get to be fully Brea and Ula gets to be fully Ula and everybody else gets to be fully them, that's a very beautiful boundary of self. So I don't have to diminish parts of myself, selfless, right? Look at that word in of itself, selfless. I don't want less parts of myself. I've lived a whole lifetime of like adapting to other people's energies and shifting and like, oh, I got to make you more comfortable or, oh, I got to shine a little less bright because I can tell you're not liking that or whatever the thing is. So that's being selfless in a really unsustainable, unboundaried way, but subtle. So I love this image of us all being self-full. And then I get to see Ula in her full self. And I'm like, and she's not adapting to make me comfortable. And like, yay, because that's a gift. What a freaking gift to be in that space where we can just be ourselves and you get to, like, so I think that's a beautiful thing to unpack. And if anybody's listening to this and you're kind of going, wait a second. Like I hadn't thought about it that way. Like, yes. And therapy. That's for me. That was actually, I didn't learn this quite in yoga. This is like definitely a therapy thing, having a very wonderful person to work with and see these things in ourselves. And where am I being selfish? Where am I being selfless? And I think you made and something my therapist also said too, what you said, Ula, of how selfish is it to project our assumptions on somebody else in the name of, but I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you the spiritual secret in that context that you said. It's very selfish. A good teacher and this practice of yoga wants us to discover this on our own. This is in a space of growth and togetherness where we're in community still. So I'm not saying this is an isolated practice, but on our own, meaning self-full. Does that, yeah, anyways, I hope that sort of like, it gives us stuff to chew on of just like, what does it mean to be self-full? And as a teacher, what does it mean to show up in your class and have clear boundaries and still be kind and still be able to be like, okay, class over. Great to see you guys. Everybody, you walk away. You're not thinking about your class and all the things that you think you did wrong. Because there's being self-full, I think. Yeah, leaving that. And then that gives the people in their class more space to be self-full. Okay. Love that. Another one we could probably talk 5 hours more on, but let's continue. Okay. So being a good quote, quote teacher means being your fullest, beautifulest self. Now, some of the other ones that I think were on my list, we have already talked about. So I'm actually going to skip a few things, not that anybody can see my list here. But I'm going to go over into teaching the 90-minute class as the gold standard. So I used to think that. I used to be like, yeah, 90 minutes, an hour and a half, how glorious. We get to move, we get to breathe, we get to do Shavasana. And actually, it is. I love that. If we have the time to do a 90-minute class as a teacher, it gives me more space. As the students, we get all of that gloriousness. And in reality, most of us don't have 90 minutes in our lives. or at different phases of our lives, we might. But if you have kids, if you have work, if you have jobs, responsibilities, caretaking, whatever, 90 minutes is a lot. And we also know if we're going to a 90-minute yoga studio or a yoga studio class for that 90-minute class, it's never just a 90-minute class because it's your travel time. It's getting there early enough to get your favorite spot. It's getting there, maybe chatting with people afterwards. And so that 90-minute class ends up maybe being like 2.5 hours, 3 hours out of your day, maybe. That's a lot. So I am the biggest fan of like little movements more often. I'm grateful to have Heart and Bones online where it's literally like on your thing. See the thing that you hold in your hand all the time and look at called your phone? You know, you can do a 10-minute practice from your phone and feel better. But that was a big pattern for myself as a teacher that I really had to unlearn and learn to trust. And learn to trust that an hour or an hour and a half, while amazing, isn't realistic. And I can actually feel pretty damn amazing doing 20 minutes, doing 10 minutes, and maybe doing 10 minutes twice a day. So that is a big one. And I hope we're able to trust that. And of course, if you're a yoga studio or a teacher who teaches at a yoga studio, yeah, you're probably going to teach an hour and a half, but maybe for your own body and your own practice, if you don't have the time for that, you know, that glorious, again, this like hierarchical way of being. And I feel like in the old days of like, if you're a yoga teacher, you must unroll your yoga mat in the morning, you know, have your practice. And it always comes in that like yoga teacher voice of like, unroll your yoga mat for an hour and be on your mat and do the thing. I personally never been that person. I find it super hard. And so that was, again, very validating for me to go, oh, I don't have to sit on my mat, stand on my mat, do all the things for an hour, because that's just not my wiring. That's not how I am. And when I do these little bits of movement more often, and I'm being mindful throughout my day, aware of my thoughts as best I can, aware of how I'm relating and interacting. Oh, right, I'm doing yoga. I hope that helps give a little bit more permission. And then we're going to wrap it up on this last one, which is I no longer, and I hope I didn't do this too much, but I no longer center myself in the class. And there's a lot of layers we can unpack with that one. So so you might be hearing and like, well, I don't center myself in the class. Guess what, my friends? I'm gonna push back a little bit if you are thinking that, because there's like the obvious ways of, yeah, you probably don't center yourself like telling stories about your life ahead of time as if everybody cares, or that's your, you know, that's not your stage. I'm sure most of us aren't using our yoga mat at the front of the class as our center stage to put on the Brea show or the Ula show, right? We're probably not doing that, but where we might center ourselves in the class is maybe after the class when you're at home and you're thinking, or you're walking and leaving the studio and your mind is like, oh my God, I can't believe I messed that side up. And oh, that person at the back of the room wasn't smiling. I don't think they like this class. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that thing. Oh, that sequence was crap. Nobody likes me. Like, have we ever been there? Right? Let's raise our hand together for the times that we've overthought our classes. That's, in my opinion, that's centering ourselves. And there's a fine line between like, let's be reflective, of course. Let's be thoughtful and, was that good? But when it becomes a pattern of rumination and a pervasive feeling of my teaching isn't good enough, you're centering yourself. Because at the heart of this, as teachers, and I say this all the time in almost everything that I teach when I'm teaching with teachers, is this. Why are you teaching yoga? Why are we teaching yoga? Why did you start? And most of the time, the answer is because it helped us feel good. And I want to teach yoga to help others feel good. And so this practice of yoga but then we start teaching and it becomes all about us. Well, they're going to think I'm an imposter. They're going to think I don't know enough. They're going to blah, 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 all this stuff. And then we forget that, oh yeah, right, I'm doing this because I'm teaching yoga and I love yoga and it can help people. So when we decenter our egos and our minds in it, which is normal. We're normal. We're human. We care. I think we center ourselves in that way because we also care. And I love that. Of course we care. I love that we're thinking so much about it because you actually care. Am I doing a good job? But there's a fine line and a refinement that comes with maturity, practice, and wisdom where you can still be critical about yourself and your teaching, but with kindness and love in a short amount of time. Right? You can maybe have a moment where you look back and you're like, oh man, I totally missed that one side. We didn't even finish. Shoot. Oh God, I can't believe I did that. Haha. Well, oh well, it's over now. What can I do? Right. And then like that's maturing and that's decentering yourself. I hope that helps in terms of like, yes, so we can talk, obviously most of us listening to this are not those teachers who are like, look at me in my one-armed handstand at the front of the class, or me doing my monologue about my life that I shouldn't be, that nobody cares about. That's, we got that. But the inner stuff, those deeper things, can we decenter ourselves in that way? Ula, I can see you've got so much that you want to share. I want to hear you.
No, I'm not gonna add too much onto this. If funny enough, what was popping into my head was when I used to be in the service industry. I know this may be like, what is this kind of? But I remember one of the managers I had back in the day in a restaurant, when something would go wrong, they would literally say like, "Guys, we're selling chicken fingers and fries. Is it that deep? Is it that serious? Like, get out of your own head about these things." And different jobs, it's just funny. It's like, I think different roles, different things that we do in our life, often this is like an issue of centering ourselves. We live in this like bubble of, I am the main character in this story. And, you know, when I used to work at Lululemon, another thing was like, if the store isn't on fire and there's cash in the till, it's okay, right? Like, unless the store is burning down, no one's dying. Like, this is fine. Like, we fold pans, guys. It's like not that deep. It's not that serious. And same thing with yoga. Like, is yoga serious? It can be, for sure. It's like a serious practice. It can be. You can teach. You know, you can learn a lot about yourself. There's community. There's all these things. But like messing up a cue, or like if you forgot the one side, or I was thinking of the times where, you know, as a new teacher, I would cram too much into a practice, right? You put out your sequence, and I'm trying to cram 50 postures into a practice, and halfway through it, you're like, I'm just going to cut the second half because this is way too crazy. This will never fit into an hour, right? Like, there's these quote unquote mistakes we made, but honestly, most of the time, the people that you know, that are taking your class won't even notice those little things. And if you're not centering yourself, you kind of just have to like get over yourself and be like, was it what my students needed in that moment? Was I paying attention to them? And if I was, then I'm sure it was great.
That's it. That's it. And I think also too, we don't understand. Well, so okay, systems of
I
power
feel like we need
showing
a
up
jingle.
again.
Systems of power.
I know. Yeah. Every time we're like,
Bow, bow,
that's a
bow,
brilliant
bow, the
idea.
horn.
Like, but yeah, every time we name that, it's like systems of power. Yeah. I love, because how playful is that, right? Instead of this being like, oh God, this like world that we are in, it's like, actually, well, no, that's also like when we can be playful about it. It's we give it less power. When we name it and are playful about it, it has less power. But isn't that the systems of power that also force us? That's a perfectionism tendency, right? Like when we're centering our ability, like, oh shit, I did the thing wrong. I said that, like, look, I just swore on this podcast. Oh no, nobody's going to listen to it. Maybe, sure. But it's that perfectionist tendency that keeps us small, that keeps us in our main character syndrome, because it's like this default of negativity towards ourselves. And guess what happens? Two things. So when we are comfortable with making mistakes, because mistakes are absolutely going to happen in your class, out of your class, as a human, mistakes should actually be celebrated, in my opinion, as part of the learning process. If you make a mistake in your class and you're like kind of casual and funny about it, or however it is for you, guess what probably happens? Most people are going to see that and be like, whether they realize it consciously or not, they're going to feel a sigh of relief. Because when we talk about the power dynamics in a yoga class between teacher and student, we're, you know, and we talked a lot so far about the teachers having the power dynamic. As a student, many students are unconsciously or consciously coming into the class, putting you on a pedestal. You're the expert. Oh, you teach yoga. Oh, you must na na na. And then when they see their teacher mess up a left and right and kind of laugh it off in a comfortable, confident way, guess what? You just taught them yoga in that moment, because it's like, then that gives them that reflection and permission that they're allowed to mess up. Because that same perfectionist tendency is showing up in the to the students as well. So I'd argue, like, be, as I think professionally and professional, as we mentioned multiple different times in this podcast
We need a t-shirt,
series that we do.
professionally or
Yeah.
yeah.
Unprofessional, or another like jingle every time we say that, like systems of power, pew, 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 and then like professionally unprofessional, that's us. Okay. And then, so I think I said only one thing, but I had said two things. And now I think our jingle distracted me from where my thought pattern was, which, look at that, professionally unprofessional, my friends. Regardless, having this ability to show up as yourself is the teaching. Letting go of the perfectionism is the teaching. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Yes. So then the last piece of that is, if I'm centering myself in the moment, in the context that we're talking about, of like, oh God, they're all looking at me, they're all judging me, oh, I can't believe I said that thing, like whatever story we have going on in the back of our head while we're saying downward dog, step the right foot forward, but meanwhile there's this whole litany of things in the back of the head. Guess what we're not centering? We're not centering the people in our classes. Because in my opinion, as a teacher, it's important to learn how to tune in, whatever that means for you and however that shows up for you. There's a level of teaching, educating, sharing knowledge and information that is a two-way street, that is an organic, beautiful, magical process. Alchemy, almost, if that's sort of a cheesy way to say it, but like, that happens when we're in a learning scenario. When I'm, as a teacher, space holder for the time that I'm in that space, tuning in and showing up for the process, the practice. This is why we call yoga practice. When I show up for that practice and process for us all, then it's much more free, because then I can respond as necessary. I can sort of adjust. Oh, that pose didn't work. Okay, ooh, let's go over here. Rather than like, I'm going to say the things I plan to say and I'm not doing the thing because now I'm out doubting everything. And then you're not tuning into that process anymore. So I hope that's a kind of a deeper layer of thinking about this. Also, hashtag no pressure. Because if you're hearing that going like, tuning in and what? That sounds like a lot. Don't overthink that either. Truly, that just will arise when we get out of our own way, when we show up to teach, because ultimately it's just human connection. Human connection is something you know how to do. It is something you've known how to do since the first time you looked into the eyes of your caregiver. That is human connection. And it's been twisted, of course, with systems of power. But here we can go back into our yoga and back into our practice and look for connection. Don't they say that? Isn't that what yoga is like union, yoking, connection, all these different words, connection to self, connection to other. So that's a nice place to end on. Hey, Ula, I think we covered a lot.
Perfect. My takeaway is we're probably going to have to do that cult themed podcast sooner rather than later. We are collecting stories for that, so I'm going to definitely put the link into the description. We're collecting for 4 different story time topics. I think teachers have really great stories out there. Even if you're a student, just click the link. You'll see all the prompts that we have right now.
Yeah. So can I jump in? Because so that story time is sort of just this, like, we want your stories and we'll read them and share them on the podcast. So yes, you've heard me and Ula talk this whole time, but now we want to hear your real life, kind of playful, scary, funny, sad, whatever kind of stories that we'll share, just to kind of normalize things. So please don't be shy. They'll be anonymous. You don't have to say your name or anything. So you can spill the tea on whatever.
So that'll be linked into the description of this episode. And if Bree's reflections resonated, if this conversation kind of hit home or was, challenge your own assumptions about teaching, you'll definitely want to check out our 200 and 300 hour online trainings. It is now open for fall enrollment. So this kind of evolution is built into the experience. And if you want more, Bree is hosting a free live workshop on inclusive yoga classes. So you will also find the link in the description below. We also have already done a podcast on that topic as well. So you can have a listen there. And then Bree is going to jump even further into the topic on the live workshop where you'll be able to ask your questions and be part of the community.
Yeah. And of course, obviously, super biasly, like join the teacher training, because how cool is it? So, everything we're talking about here shows up in this training in a variety of ways. So it's pretty, of course, biased, but it's pretty special and people love it. And we would love, 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 love to have you join us in community for this next cohort.
Well, thank you, Brea.
Thank you, Ula. And thank you to everybody for listening, as always.
Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah, pew, pew, pew.
Oh,
Oh, that's good.